Geiser from NYSARC. I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar today. We are really excited about this webinar that will be given from CQL. Faith Aiken, who is a Senior Research Analyst, and Becky Hansen, who is the Chief Services Officer with CQL, will be speaking. Before I turn it over to them, I did want to just touch base on where NYSARC stands as an organization in terms of CQL and our data usage in terms of the personal outcome measures. It's been kind of an exciting time over the last 2 years. 39 of our 49 chapters, or about 80%, are now CQL accredited. I'd like to congratulate the last 3 chapters to receive the accreditation. That was our Westchester, our Suffolk, and our Chautauqua chapters. And we've done a great job as an organization in the last 2 years. Since 2014, we've actually doubled the number of chapters that have become accredited, and we're getting closer, it seems, each and every week to reaching our goal of becoming the first nonprofit organization of its type to be fully CQL accredited. One of the things that we did this year with CQL is we were able to feed back to our chapters some metrics in terms of personal outcome measures and some national benchmarks, some state benchmarks, and how the NYSARC chapters were doing relative to those 2 other areas. We were also able to look at our quality indicators and compare how chapters who had the CQL accreditation performed relative to those chapters that had not received accreditation. And we were pleased to see that for virtually all of our indicators, the CQL accredited chapters did perform slightly better in almost every category. We'll have to see if this trend continues. I think it probably will, and that'll be something that we monitor going forward. So it's just an exciting time, and one of the things I think we heard pretty clearly from our chapters was that many of them were collecting personal outcome measure interview data. And they sometimes would use the CQL database. Other chapters have kind of homegrown systems. But many chapters were wondering how they should be using the personal outcome metric data and using it to drive quality improvement. So we reached out to NYSARC, and Faith and Becky were great to work with, and they helped put this PowerPoint together. They'll give an overview of their data systems. They're kind of in transition. I think they'll speak to that. But without further ado, I'd just like to turn it over to Faith and Becky and welcome them both.
Thank you so much, Eric. This is Faith Aiken, and as Eric mentioned, I'm the Senior Research Analyst here at CQL. And so I'm going to start out our presentation by giving an overview of what we'll be covering today. Okar, I'm sorry, it doesn't look like I'm able to advance the slides. Don't know if you need to give me control of the screen, or if you could advance to the next slide. Great. So what we'll be covering today, first, as Eric mentioned, we're going to go over a quick tutorial on the POM database and the reporting functions. I know a lot of you are currently using our database, so you are really experts or novices, and we're going to go over it from a 30,000-foot view and give a basic overview. From there, we will talk about how to use the data, what we can do once we have our hands on the data, how we can look at it in different ways, what the data is telling us, what sort of questions we can ask from the data, and specifically we're going to look at rights, integrated environments, and realizing goals. From there, we will move to, Becky will cover how organizations are using their data for quality improvement in Factor 10. So for those of you who are accredited, you'll understand what Factor 10, and Becky will give a good explanation of that as we move forward. So it looks like the car is working fast and furious to kind of advance us along. I'm just going to keep going. If you have questions, I think that there's capacity for you to raise your hand on your little webinar, GoToWebinar browser, or type a question into the chat box. I will do my best to pause and answer questions that come up And I'm also going to try to move slowly because I know that this can be a little bit daunting. So first and foremost, let's just go over quickly the vision and mission of CQL. For those of you who are familiar with us, our vision is that we seek to have a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people. That's not just for people with disabilities, but notice that all people. We do that through our mission. Our mission is dedicated to the definition, measurement, and improvement of personal quality of life. So 3 ways that we accomplish that mission is through our services, which are accreditation, training, and consultation. So as Eric mentioned, 80% of NYSARC organizations are accredited. That's amazing. We also provide training around different areas such as the personal outcome measures, self-advocacy, supported decision-making. We have a training menu on our website that I would be happy to share. Should we take a pause?
Yeah, I'm sorry, having some technical difficulties.
That's okay. Why don't I pause for a moment so that I don't move forward too far on the slides, and we will just pause and come back when we're all up and running. If it's possible for you not to end the Google Chrome.
Okay, try now.
Oh, amazing. I think that we're here. Okay, great. Yes, thank you, Prakar. All right, so through our, I want to cover some of our tools that we use. So you might be familiar with the personal outcome measures. Those are developed in 1993 and are really values-based. It's a valid and reliable assessment tool. There are 21 factors measuring outcomes and presence of supports. We'll go through those 21 outcomes quickly in a moment. The basic assurances, as I mentioned, Becky's going to cover in the latter part of our presentation. Those include the Factor 10 and provider level regulatory review. And then the person-centered excellence form of accreditation is where we involve multiple stakeholders in assessing provider performance. So just on a broader scale, the basic assurances measure the system and the practices that are in place, while the POM measures the outcomes for the person and the process. So we're talking about the POM. And the personal outcome measures are 21 outcomes divided into 3 indicators. So the first indicator is myself. So who I am as a result of my unique hereditary life experiences and decisions. So those outcomes are connection to natural supports, intimate relationships, that people are safe, that they have the best possible health, that they're exercising their rights, being treated fairly, are free from abuse and neglect, experiencing continuity and security, and are deciding when to share their personal information. The second indicator is my world, where I live, where I work, where I socialize, belong, or connect. Those outcomes are a lot around choice. So who do I live with, where do I live, and have I chosen that? Where I work, am I using my environment, living in integrated environments, interacting with other members of the community, performing different social roles, and choosing services. Finally, we have the indicator of my dreams. And these involve discovery, choice, and self-determination, how people want their lives to look like. So do they choose their personal goals? Have they realized those goals? Are they participating in the life of the community? Do they have friends, and are they experiencing respect? All of these combined really narrow into the focus of that person's life and what's important to that person right now. So again, now that we have the basic overview of the personal outcome measures, as I mentioned earlier, the POM is a reliable and valid tool. They emphasize on a person's identified quality of life. So the benchmark is really up to the person as how they identify their life and what makes it quality. So I'm going to go into now our database. As some of you are familiar and some of you are using your own homegrown database systems, I want to do a quick overview of the CQL online database. As Eric mentioned, we are currently in transition. We are improving our database and are moving to a customized platform. What I'm showing you today is the current database that we have. We will be rolling out into a new database system in the spring of 2017. However, the features that I'm showing you today will be available in our new system. So what I'm walking you through now will be applicable. It may look different. And when we get to that, when we get to the spring of 2017, we will absolutely provide a webinar and training and technical assistance on using the new database. So what we'll cover today is the interview tool, so the POM itself, what it looks like, how it's entered, tracking for the administrative features of the database, and the development of reports and those features. So let's see. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, great. All right. So you can see here, this is the personal outcome measure interview tool. This is web-based. So each organization receives a unique link that they copy and paste into their web browser and pull up their interview tool. Interviewers are able to enter demographic information, information around the different 21 outcomes that I went through earlier, and then further demographic information that specify type of residence, the kind of supports that they're receiving, where they go during the day, and that kind of information. There's also a spot for notes, and then to go over consent that they're willing to have their information in the database. I'm going to quickly go over, so when it's all said and done, it's quite extensive. So printing out the full report, as you can see here, it's over 25 pages. I think when there's notes included, some people have told us it ends up being like 60 pages. That may be cumbersome to print and keep on file, so we do have this sheet at the end. So once I've filled out a completed interview, it automates these charts to say, of the 21 outcomes, it will show me a 1 if it's a present and 0 if it's not present. So at the end, I'm able to sum up the 20 X amount are present, and the same for supports. So of the 21 supports, X are present. And I know a lot of organizations have been printing just this page to keep in an individual's file. On the back end, so for our database administrators, they're able to look and see what interviews have been done. And you can see here that I've entered fake data. So this isn't anyone's names, and that's why you'll see it also looks a little wonky. So they're able to pull up the name of the person who's interviewed and then look at that survey more closely. And then on the overview end, they're able to look at who interviewed them. Were they a certified interviewer? Were they not a certified interviewer? And quickly manage the database in that way. From this format, they're able to export these responses in long form. So they're able to export them in a way, a CSV file you can open through Excel and look at the database in that way through SPSS or an XML spreadsheet. You're able to edit survey links. So if this was a survey that I wanted to continue to work on, I would come and find it in my database. I click that button, I go to Actions, and edit this response. And then it would pull up the interview format for me to make changes or finish the survey if I hadn't completed. There's also automated reports in our online database. This one is a summation of personal outcome measures for the whole organization. So I have 100 fake surveys in here, and what this is going to do is give me a summary of the 100 people that have received interviews. This number have this outcome in place. Again, remember that the surveys that I do have in here is fake data. So of the 100 people, 19 people have natural supports present and the outcome present. 7 have the supports in place. So this is a really handy tool when you are doing a large volume of interviews to have a quick overview of how many people have the outcome or the present or the support in place. To that end, I'm also able to look at it in bar graph form. So again, of the 100 people who I have interviews for, this is saying that 80 have answered this question, 61 do not have this outcome present, 19 do, and I'm able to look at it in bar graph form. Over here, I'm able to look at the supports in place. So 7 of the 82 who answered this question have the support in place, 13 don't, but are developing plans, 19 do not, and they are aware, they don't have plans developed, and 43 do not have it in place again. A reminder again, this is fake data. One of the things that I'm able to do is, again, export this report. I can send it to a PDF, to a Word document, to a PowerPoint, and each graph goes on a separate PowerPoint slide to an Excel spreadsheet where I could play with the data further. Another function in here is you can customize these graphs. So as I click on it, I'm able to change the title. I can customize it to say whatever I want. I'm able to add filters. So if I'm interested in looking at natural support presence, and I want to add a filter of I'm curious about people who have the natural support present and live in a group home, I'm able to create a filter that will give me that specific information. And this looks complicated and cumbersome now, but I would be happy to walk through this with anyone who wants a little more technical assistance. I'm mostly doing it quickly right now to show you. So that's how quickly I can build a filter to look at specific information. I want to show you now that we know, now that we're experts on where we get the data from and how we can look at it, I want to show you different ways and what the data is currently telling us. Well, where's my card? Do you know where the PowerPoint went? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Great. Thank you. So this is over 20 years worth of data of the personal outcome measure data. This is from 1993 through 2015, and our N is almost 10,000 people. You can see at the top of the bar graph are things that we are doing well. You can see our top 3 are that people are safe, they're free from abuse and neglect, they're experiencing continuity and security. However, there are some things that we're not doing well. We look at our bottom 3, a lot of them have to do around choice. They're not, only 46% are choosing where and with whom they live, 42% are performing different social roles, and 41% choosing where they work. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few that we want to take a closer look at. These are actually the 3 Eric mentioned that he had shared benchmark data from the state of New York, the national database, and NYSARC accredited organizations. These are 3 outcomes where NYSARC organizations on average didn't meet or surpass the benchmarks from New York State or the national average. So first, let's take a look at exercising rights. As we know, this is a very important outcome. This is from the national total for 2015 of 622 interviews. Only 45% of people had the outcome present of exercising rights. One way to further look into that, this is looking at 2015 and 16 data so far, is dividing it into waiver authorities. As you can see, if we look at my red My red is home and community-based settings. My blue are ICF settings. As we can see, in every area selected, home and community-based settings more often have the outcome present or the specific right present. So 93% of people feel like they're able to file complaints. 73% feel like they're able to have visitors. 93% feel like they have the right to practice religion. 67% feel like they have the right to vote. 79% feel like they have the right to access food. The blue shows us the ICF settings, and you can see the discrepancy, most notably in being able to access food. The second outcome we wanted to look at is living in integrated environments. And this question asks, does the person use the same environments used by people without disabilities for living, for work, for school, leisure, and places of worship? Let's look at these pie charts one by one. So, does the person use the same environment at home? 55%, that's my green, are saying yes. As people without disabilities, 42% are saying no, and 4% are saying no due to personal choice. At work, you can see that my no is a much larger piece of the pie. 61% are saying no, I'm not in an integrated environment at work, while 31% are saying yes and 8% are saying no, but that's due to choice. You can see that the pie is a little more evenly divided at school, with almost 1/3 in no, no due to personal choice, and yes. And then just in the general community, this is where people are saying yes, they are in an integrated environment the most often. The third and final outcome that we want to look at is, has the person accomplished something that is significant to him or her in the past year or two? So for the national average, 60% of people with disabilities are saying, yes, this outcome is present in my life, while 40% are saying, no, this outcome is not present. I pulled some comments. I changed names, obviously, and some details so that they're not identifiable. Ian attended a first aid class. He was very proud of himself. Unfortunately, someone reported they have nothing to be proud of. Diana has lost weight doing Tai Chi on Wednesday nights. And Don renewed his driver's license and was able to drive himself to vote. So as you can see, there's a real variety in realizing their goals. This is something that's self-identified, and we want to make sure that it's present in the last 1 or 2 years. So with that very quick overview of the personal outcome measures and how we can look at some of the data in detail, we're going to transition now into how organizations are using the data for quality improvement. And Becky, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about Factor 10.
Thanks, Faith. And this slide has a few things of animation, so you'll have to click a few times here. And hi, everyone. This is Becky Hansen, and I did just want to take a moment to recognize all of the work that you have done as a collective group. I work with staff that facilitate accreditation, training, and certification, and the organizations that you all are affiliated with are among the best that CQL is in contact with. And it's very common that staff come back after working with you in your organizations and have lots of good things to say and are really encouraged by all of the work that is happening. So I'm going to focus, as Faith said, on how personal outcome data is integrated into the accreditation experience and ultimately integrated quality management. So this slide here, really talks about quality, and there has been a great deal of conversation within your state as well as nationally around defining quality, around monitoring quality, and really starting to take a look at what that means. From CQL's perspective, quality is defined very differently. Quality assurance are basic standards typically related to compliance, things that address health, safety, and human security, things that are incredibly important, but when we're talking about quality assurance, these are must-have minimum standards in order to be a provider organization. We think of this as really just the fundamentals or the ground level. Quality enhancement is about continuous improvement and making services and the quality of support excellent so people can achieve their outcomes. We believe that both of these are needed. When you look on the left-hand side of the screen, it really talks about the quality of services. If we're defining quality only by compliance issues and the minimum, we know that the quality of services and also the quality of life is going to be lower. As we continue to build on the quality enhancement, the quality of services and the quality of life for people increases. One of the ways that we can monitor that and quantify that is through the use of the personal outcome measures data. And as we start to put strong systems and practices in place over time, those scores tell us whether we are being successful in producing those outcomes for people. I think we can go to the next slide. I want to touch briefly on what CQL refers to as Factor 10. Many of you are accredited and at this point are very aware of what Factor 10 is. And I know some of you may be just in the process of preparing for accreditation. Part of the accreditation process focuses on a basic assurances monitoring plan, or also known as an integrated quality management plan. These standards that you see on your screen now are standards that are part of the accreditation process and what we consider must-have, that lower level of quality, that there has to be basic systems and practices in place that address each of these 10 areas. The standards that relate to rights, dignity and respect, natural support, keeping people free from abuse, neglect, mistreatment, and exploitation, health, safety, staff, positive supports, and continuity all tie back to the personal outcomes. So these standards really guide organizations in what you need to have in terms of policies, procedures, assessments, trainings, the nuts and bolts. It also looks at how effective are these nuts and bolts in producing outcomes for people. So the basic assurances and the outcomes data are really intended to go hand in hand. Organizations that are accredited by CQL need to have a plan to bring all of these basic assurances into alignment with the standards, and then also to have a way to make sure that they stay in place. One of the components of the plan and the monitoring process includes the use of data to really guide the learning that happens at the organizational level. And a key piece of data that should be incorporated into this quality management plan are the personal outcomes. You can go to the next slide. When building a quality management plan and thinking about the data to pull into this plan, there's three main questions that we really encourage organizations to think about. How is quality defined? It is one thing to be in alignment with a policy being in a file, or to have a right statement that's signed off on by all of the people you support. It's a different thing for people to truly know and exercise their rights. So when thinking about that definition of quality, you really have to be clear on what does quality mean and how are we going to measure it. And when we go to that higher level of definition in quality, it becomes clear that we need to have a combination of data sets, and we have to really find a way to focus on what the outcomes and supports are telling us. Because you have invested so heavily in the personal outcomes and you have access to tools to help manage that data, that is one of the things that can help guide you and to let your organization know if you have it. After that data is gathered and collected and part of a plan, then the intent is to learn from it and to be able to analyze and dissect what the information is telling us so we can continuously get better. And this one, Faith, you can click a few times. I've got a few animations on here. So Factor 10 is really intended to bring together key pieces of information and data so organizations can make decisions about how to align resources. There's a limited amount of time and money and resources, and a strong quality plan can help agencies focus and really zero in on particular areas that they want to enhance. By incorporating and focusing on the personal outcomes, you have the ability to use data in multiple ways, especially through the use of technology. Faith demonstrated briefly how you can slice and dice the data, how you can drill down, and how you can isolate variables to enhance that learning. The ultimate goal is to help organizations leverage strengths for sustainability and to be able to benefit from the use of the information not only on an individual level at that planning process level, but also collectively as an organization and also in your case as an association. So again, what makes for strong systems? Having the ability to evaluate basic assurances and to see at a high level which systems are producing results and which ones are not. Give organizations the ability to be proactive versus reactive, and we know that organizations that have strong systems and practices in place around the basic assurances are more successful in producing outcomes for people. If we only focus on the personal outcomes and those questions and that assessment, but don't address the fundamental policies, procedures, and nuts and bolts of the organization, it's very difficult to truly transform organizationally to a person-directed and person-centered organization. By linking these two sets of information together, we know that results are more likely to occur. So in terms of collecting data, most organizations that we work with collect a lot of information. It's not that there is a lack of data already being collected, but we're sometimes in a situation where we don't know what to do with it. So we really want to focus on not simply collecting more data, but collecting quality information that can be analyzed and then acted upon. When we think of the basic assurances monitoring system, there's really two components, and this applies to the data and the information that's generated from the POMS assessment as well. Ultimately, we want to make people's lives better, and information that we learn on an individual level is intended to be, used to strengthen our support. Organizationally, when we pull that information together and look at it collectively and then make improvements based upon that, that's what really gives us the ability to strengthen our overall organization and to have a continuous system of support. So when we're talking about data and integrated quality management plan, again, the intent is not to simply collect data or different types of data, but to think of the data that's collected as telling a story, and to look for the information that that data tells us, to act on it, and then ultimately make decisions that enhance services and produce more outcomes for people. For agencies that have invested in reliable personal outcome measures, trainers, or interviewers, you have the ability to collect reliable data that you can count on. So that ability to be able to administer the personal outcome measures assessment and to have information that you can count on again, gives you the ability as an individual organization to strengthen your services, but it also, over time, creates a powerful set of information that can be used for advocacy and a lot of other work beyond just the individual follow-up that takes place. We touched on this already, that the data analysis is something that CQL sincerely wants to support organizations in excelling with. Most human service organizations are best at, working with people, and sometimes that data collection piece is new or it's overwhelming. So as Faith said, we truly want to be a resource in helping you get comfortable with the online data system, customizing reports, and making sure that the tools that we have are effective in giving you the information that you need to ensure that your basic assurances are producing outcomes for people. I want to touch briefly on just some examples of how data can be used. Some of this is for example purposes only, and some of it is information that has been published, and possibly some of you may have seen this already. On this slide, there is information that I find fascinating and really powerful. CQL conducted research on the national data that's been collected several years ago and looked for correlations, meaning they wanted to isolate outcomes that seemed to be predictors, meaning that if people had these outcomes in place, they were more likely to have a higher overall quality of life score. The outcomes on the top were those that had the highest correlations with that higher overall quality of life score. So what we can glean from this information is that when people have true access and are empowered to exercise their rights, their entire life is more likely to improve, which is no surprise. When people are treated fairly, they truly have the support to exercise those rights and due process in place when it's necessary, that is one of the top outcomes that's correlated with a higher overall quality of life. When you're choosing where and with whom to live, your life is likely to be better. When you're interacting with people in the community who aren't paid to be with you, your life is likely to be better. When you are choosing where you work and what you do for your career, school, or retirement, your life is likely to be better. And I don't think that that comes as any surprise to us, but again, having that quantifiable and that evidence to support that is powerful. On the bottom of the screen, these are the outcomes that are the lowest correlations with higher overall quality of life. I want to stress that this doesn't mean that these outcomes are not important. They're critically important, but they're basic assurances. These are the must-haves. Simply keeping people safe or keeping them from being abused or making sure that their health needs are met is not going to produce a high level of quality of life or quality of service. It's a minimum standard that we have to have. So we can't stop there. This is just evidence that these are the must-haves, and to really get people the lives that they want, we have to shoot for those bigger areas that are on the top of the slide. This slide is difficult to see, but I wanted to just show it again. This is pulled from the Fluid Surveys system. So what it would allow you to do as an organization or an association is to drill down. So we know that rights is one of those predictor outcomes, and if we can get rights in place, more good things are likely to happen to people. So rather than just knowing, that yes, rights is a problem and 50% of the people are exercising their rights and 50% are not, the system allows you to drill down. And what we know, based on data that we look at, is a lot of times people have challenges or restrictions around their money. They have challenges and restrictions around food and who they can spend time with. And that may or may not be the case in your organization, but being able to drill down to learn more about what's causing that positions you to provide support to move forward in that area. The system also identifies who's limiting that right. Is it a guardian? Is it the organization? Does the person live with somebody who has needs that ultimately infringe on their rights as well? So the intent, again, is just to give you the information so you can take action. This slide here is just laying the personal outcomes with the basic assurances indicators. So those blue cells that popped up are tied back to one of those 10 basic assurances. And again, just to stress that basic assurances and personal outcome measures are really intended to be used together to maximize results. So these next slides will just touch on a few examples of how data can be used to inform organizations and systems about outcomes for people. So I don't want you to focus so much on this data because this was just a sample that was pulled, but more about the information that can be gleaned and the types of reports that can be generated. So in this example, it's taking factor 7 out of the basic assurances and staff resources and support and thinking about what data would we want to know in terms of, are we being successful? Are we meeting our definitions of quality in this area? So in this example, it looked at the average outcomes being achieved by people compared against the level and amount of support that they are receiving. So in this example, it shows that people who were receiving 12 hours a day or more of support were receiving more outcomes than people who were in around-the-clock services and support. That doesn't mean that that is the cause of a person achieving their outcomes or not, but it isolates the group of people that are more likely to be achieving outcomes compared to those that are not. So the data really empowers organizations to be able to isolate and then to drill further into the causal factors for these numbers. In this situation, it's looking at residential type and how that affects people's outcomes. In this slide, again, I don't think that there are any surprises for those of us who would know about these different types of services, but again, this is quantifiable data that can be used for advocacy, can be used for planning, and it's really powerful. We know that in this data set that people who are in state-operated group homes are achieving far less outcomes than everyone else. When people have their own homes or apartments, they're achieving far more outcomes. So again, we've always, I think, known this, but to be able to have the evidence to demonstrate that when people have more choice and control about where they live and who they live with, there's a correlation in terms of their quality of life as well. Some other ways that data in examples, can be cross-tabbed. The size of a residence. We can see here that when people live with fewer people, it's more likely that they're going to have a higher quality of life. And some examples here about when they live with more people, that affects the outcomes as well. In this example, the people that were included in the sample that had intensive medical support needs had less outcomes, but those that had intensive behavioral support needs didn't have that much variance. So again, just an example of how you can isolate and look at specific factors against the outcomes being achieved. On this slide, again, it's looking at areas related to rights and decision-making. And it showed that people that have full guardianships in place are achieving less outcomes than those people that have limited guardianship or different types of support in decision-making. So those, again, were just a few examples of how data can be analyzed to really inform organizations about how they're performing, where they're excelling, and where there may be gaps. There are multiple reports such as that are built into the fluid survey system that can be run very easily. And there's also possibilities for CQL to customize reports if there was something very specific that a system wanted to know and to be able to identify that through the data. So I wanted to just provide some scenarios to let you have a glimpse of what information can be gleaned and how that relates back to quality. There are several free resources that are available on our website and included in this PowerPoint presentation. If you would like some more information, the links are included there. One of the links includes, it's called a toolkit for states, but I think it's also interesting for organizations, and it looks at all of the elements of the settings rules for home and community-based services, and it identifies specifically which data points from the basic assurances and the personal outcome measures can be used to identify if systems are in alignment with these new settings rules for home and community-based services. So with that, we have covered the information that we had pulled together and would be happy to open it up for questions or further discussion at your discretion, Eric.
Okay, thank you very much. If you do have any questions, you can certainly enter them right into the chat box. We'll be happy to take a look at them and see if we can respond. I did have a question that maybe I can throw out there. Could you comment on CQL's, I guess, in terms of like value-based payment, using personal outcome measure data to try to tie that into financial incentives? Does CQL have a position on that, or is that something other states are exploring? I was just wondering if you might be able to speak to that.
I can address that, Eric. Sounds like there might be an echo. Hopefully that resolves. Okay, sounds like the sound is better. So the personal outcome measures was never intended to be a rate setting tool, and we have communicated that with OPW. We would not ever want to use the POMs and have that identify what a rate should be in terms of providing support to a person. I think that there's a lot of potential for the tool to be misused if applied in that manner. We do strongly believe that organizations that utilize the POM should be incentivized, and that truly is a way to focus on quality. So in terms of supporting organizations, encouraging and rewarding them for using the POM as a quality metric and indicator, we're fully supportive of that. Of informing systems about different ways that they can improve, supportive of that. But in terms of using the assessment itself as a rate setting tool, we would not be supportive of that for a couple of reasons. We know that outcomes are controlled by the person, defined by the person, and really at the person's control. The support that the organization provides is within, organizational control. The more supports that we have in place, the more likely we are that outcomes will follow. But I think we really have to ensure that the integrity of the tool stays intact and is used to support and promote quality, and that we don't drift into trying to use it in ways that it was not intended to be used.
Thank you. Okay, well, I don't see any additional questions or comments. Bakar, I don't know if you can see any on your end, but if there are no additional comments, I just want to thank Faith and Becky for spending some time with us. We look forward to having them back when the new database is rolled out and getting a better understanding of what capabilities and functionality it has. And I hope everyone benefited from today's webinar, and it will be available also for future viewing. We did record today, and we'll send that link out to all of the chapters. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.